to that point about safety, another big topic that we saw come up this week is this past week, top hackers from around the world converged on DEF CON, a conference in Vegas, to essentially find flaws and exploits in the latest chatbots and models from OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, Stability, etc. This is a process that's generally referred to as red teaming. And what that means is this is a series of practices that hackers or security professionals or AI researchers will go through to try to find exploits in systems, to essentially be trying to break them in novel ways and imagine creative, though maybe not super ethical ways in which these tools could be misused. The whole point here is that by identifying these things in a controlled environment, we can make generative AI models that are much safer and more aligned. So for instance, GPT-4 was, quote, red teamed for 6 months before its release in March 2023. So the Washington Post actually shared an example of what this kind of red teaming could look like. And they say, quote, AI red teams are studying a variety of potential exploits, including, quote, prompt attacks that override a language model's built-in instructions, and, quote, data poisoning campaigns that manipulate the model's training data to change its output. So they're going through all of these different activities and scenarios to see how models and tools from these major AI companies can be misused. Now, the results of this competition that we've referenced in Vegas is actually being kept under wraps for a few months so that companies can actually address the issues without, nefarious actors learning all the mistakes and problems with their systems. So this is a huge issue in the industry, and one of kind of the main ways it seems that we're trying to actually build better systems. So my first question for you, Paul, as you're kind of reading this is, why is it so important to actually conduct red teaming? I mean, don't the companies building these systems know all the ways they can go wrong?
No, they don't have a clue. I think it goes like this is one of the big challenges of what we're doing is they're trying to build intelligence, and we don't understand human intelligence. So, going back to the Dario interview, he talked about this mechanical interpretability thing, and we talked a few weeks ago about Google had the machine on learning challenge. Like, they're trying to understand how exactly these models are learning what they're learning. They just know that if you throw more data compute at them, they seem to learn like that. But how they're learning and the decisions they make, like the example that Dario gave was almost like an MRI of the brain. Like you're trying when humans do things, like you're trying to figure out which neurons are firing in the brain that's causing someone to do something, say something. And so just like when a human takes an action, you don't really know exactly why they did it. And you can have an MRI going while they make the decision or do the thing. And you might be able to see some activity in certain parts of the brain that leads neurologists or neuroscientists to like assume that maybe this is what's going on. And there's all these studies going on to try and understand the brain. But the same thing is happening with these models. They're trying to put basically x-rays onto these models and say, why is it doing what it's doing? How is it learning that? Why is it making the predictions it's making? And so with the red teaming, what they're trying to do is they scale up. So like, you take these like GPT-4, it's a frontier model, like the most powerful models we have, and you train it for weeks or however long they end up training it on the data. You give it all this data, all this computing power, and then you have a model. Now, what that model learned and what it's now capable of are a bit of a mystery to the people who built it. So then they spend, in the case of OpenAI, 6 months red teaming it, trying to break it, trying to get it to do things that are bad, like figure out what is it actually able to do. And that's where you push these systems. And, we saw the high profile New York Times article from Kevin Roos when I think GPT-4 first came out, where he got it to, trying to get him to leave his girlfriend or something like that, or his wife. Like, so that was like post red teaming by somebody else, but that's a kind of example of where you're trying to get the system to do something. And the more powerful these systems get, the more bizarre what they may do becomes. And so the idea behind this open hackathon is bring in all these hackers, allow them access, like I think OpenAI, Google, I don't think it was, who were the other ones that allowed access?
Anthropic, Stability, these were the ones that they were trying to find exploits in.
Right. So they teamed up with the government and in this project and said, okay, we will give access to our models to these people and let them try and hack it under like NDAs, basically, where they're not allowed to say what they found
Mm.
for a few months until we fix this stuff, and ideally build them into their next foundational models and frontier models. Um, but no, we don't know what they're capable of. I think that's the whole point here, and what Dario talked a lot about is as we build more powerful systems, we're not sure what they're going to be able to do. And then the really weird part, which Dario gets into, and I think we've touched on before, is they may it sounds so weird. I know this gets like sci-fi, but they may become aware they're being red teamed
Mm.
and hide their abilities. Like that's the fear that like OpenAI has and Jeff Hinton at Google has, is that we're building something that we don't really understand. We just know it keeps getting more intelligent.
Mm.
And at some point the question is it so intelligent that it knows that it's being red teamed and it's just going to hide its abilities. So you try and get it to do something, it just won't do it in red team.
Mm.
But then it'll do it when it's out in the wild. And the researchers will think it's safe because they red teamed it. And in reality, it was just hiding its abilities. Sounds sci-fi, but it's a very, very real thing that these people worry about as they're building these things.
So is that kind of why we need humans doing this? Because if I'm looking at this kind of from the outside, I'm like, well, wouldn't a machine be better at red teaming, or do we need that kind of human agency and creativity involved here for that very reason?
I think that they think they need both.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly the AIs are being used to assess other AIs. I think they're kind of counting on the fact that that'll happen, that as they get more powerful, that we'll just build AIs that help us with this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you can't get the humans out of the loop right now, and you don't want them out of the loop. So yeah, and that article did a pretty good job of highlighting some more tangible things, some like really weird things,
Mm.
like the one about the influence campaign for politics, where the machines goes and purchases a bunch of expired internet domains from for a politician, and then like fills those domains with positive information about the politician to basically corrupt what the models learned about the politician, so they spit out positive stuff. It's like, whoa, like I mean, there's scammers and bad actors everywhere, and they're very clever. And so my mind doesn't work that way. And so when you read this kind of stuff, you're like, wow, people people spend a lot of time trying to like break things and cause harm. And so when you read these things, you realize how important it is to have this. Now, these red teaming people, like the stuff they have to see is crazy.
Mm.
Like that takes a different mindset to be able to be someone who gets on the inside and sees what these things are capable of, because you have to ask them to do horrible things and then train them not to do horrible things. Like it's not a job I would want, that's for
Mm.
sure.
We should also mention, I guess, that, this red teaming conference or competition, is taking place in concert with some of these companies. We do see, I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, it's up to you. We see red teaming happen in public in real time when it comes to open source, right?
Yeah.
So open source models are not necessarily, once they're released in the wild, people are still red teaming them, but they're also in the wild, available for anyone to actually use these exploits and take
Yeah.
advantage of.
And I will say one other thing, because you may, like, as you're listening to this, be like, well, why are they building it if they know it's capable of all these awful things?
Mm.
And Dario does address that in his, and it's commonly asked of like Sam Altman and other people. And Dario had a really interesting perspective. His take was, we're not the ones that released it. So what he was saying is he left OpenAI along with a few other people to focus on AI safety and to build models that could enable the building of safer large language models. But to do that, to be able to assure safety and alignment, they have to build their own powerful model.
Mm.
So they can't get access to OpenAI's to test it. So they had to build Claude. Now, they had a language model on par with GPT-3 when it came out, when ChatGPT came out, but they hadn't released it. What he basically was saying is OpenAI is the one that put this out into the world. We
Mm.
had it, Google had it, like other people had those capabilities. They're the ones that put it out there. Once they put it out there, everything changed. And he said, in particular, Google's reaction to ChatGPT is what triggered everything.
Mm.
So now his position is, we have to keep building the most powerful models possible, because for us to serve our mission of protecting, we have to have access to the most powerful models, which is when Darkesh said, well, what if your model gets out? What if
Mhm.
some foreign country gets access to your model? And that's when he's like, well, it's possible. Like, and that was when my Saturday was sort of, or my Sunday was sort of ruined, was like, he basically talked about if a nation state really wants a secret, they will get it. Like if they
Mhm.
put all of their resources, whatever that secret is, whatever government holds it or private corporation holds it, like they'll get it. And that's when you're just like, oh my gosh, this stuff is crazy. Like it really is nuts. But yeah, I mean, circle back. The red teaming is an essential part of how these things are built, and our thought with this podcast is just to illuminate some of these key aspects of it,
Mhm.
um, because it becomes really important as your business starts to think about the infusion of these language models to know what they're actually capable of. Like you may be enabling these things for your employees, for your customers, partnering with organizations that are building these models. And so it's really important that you understand what these things actually are and how they're built and how they're made as safe as possible. So yeah, I mean it's a crazy topic, but it's an important topic, I think, for society that people really understand what we're playing with here.